Today we're going to be installing a GrassFlap on an Exmark Radius E 48-inch. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and get the GrassFlap out of the box itself that it came in. What I usually do is, as I unwrap it, I take the parts and put them into that box. So open the box and set it aside right there where you can use it. So what I found the easiest way to do this is to find the tail of the wrap itself that's on there and just unwrap it. You can cut it with a knife, but when you do it that way, you still then have to kind of figure out how to get between each layer of the plastic and pull the parts out. So at the end of the day, it's just as easy to unwrap it. That way you get all the parts out without having any problems getting to them. So as I take them out, I'm just going to set them over here in the box so I can keep track of them. So you'll notice that also in the box there was some paper instructions in there on how to install it. There's also a little postcard in there that you can give to a friend or take it to your local dealer and show it to them so they can learn a little more about the GrassFlap as well. So I'm just going along here unwrapping each layer at a time, setting the parts into the box. So once I get the last part out, I'm just going to take this packaging and set it aside. Now we're ready to go ahead and do the actual install. So I've already removed the factory discharge chute, and I'm collecting the no drill mount, the blocker plate itself, and the hardware that I'm going to need. So I'm going to set the hardware here on the mower deck, and then I'm going to pick out the pieces that I don't need, and I'm going to set them over into the box so I don't lose them. If you keep track of the parts into the box, you won't find yourself trying to hunt around on the floor for where they fell to if you kick them around. So better off to put them in the box. So we're going to take the no drill, and it sits. There's a couple of slots on either side of the tab, the chute for the tabs for the factory chute. That no drill fits into the slots on the mount itself, and we're going to go ahead and install the bolts that came with the GrassFlap. They're 3/8 carriage bolts. We're going to run them down tight. On some of the walk-behind mowers, those slots are tight, but that will still mount into those slots. And sometimes the tabs themselves, there's a little bit of a gap between the no-drill mount and those tabs. If you just go ahead and crank the bolts down, it will pull it into place. And occasionally you have to actually take a hammer and tap on the end of the carriage bolt to drive it into that slot. But it'll go. All right, so now we've got the no drill installed. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and mount the blocker plate assembly. And so that's going to use a couple of 3/8 by 1 carriage bolts. We're going to start those on and kind of snug them down just a little bit. Now we're going to go ahead and close the blocker plate and push on it with my knee to make sure it's sealed against the side of the mower deck. Then I'm going to crank the bolts down good and tight that hold that in place. Now we want to go ahead and mount the spring mount. That takes a 1/2-inch socket. You're going to loosen the bolts that are the single bolt that's already on the mower. So we're going to slide that out. The spring mount goes over the pivot bolt, and then that spring mount bolt that we took out, we're going to just put it right back in. Now that we have that in place, the next thing we want to do then is to go ahead and put the cable. We're going to start it on here. Basically, we're doing this so that we have a good idea of the path that the cable needs to follow. That way we don't have it running into an obstruction, and if we do, we can change the height of the spring mount itself. So in this case, we're going to put the cable, the end of the cable with the fixed clevis on it that goes on the flap end. So to do that, we're going to just pull the rubber boot off, spin nut number 1 off the fitting, slip the wire into the slotted hole, and then slip the threaded fitting on up into the hole and start jam nut number 1 back onto that fitting. And the next thing we're going to do is push the rubber boot in place. Now we don't want to connect the clevis at this point because we're going to need it loose to install the cable on the pedal end. So I'm going to point the spring mount. I'm going to try and keep it aimed as low as I can and still clear the belt and whatever else. To the spring bolt, I found a 7/16 wrench just hooked into the hook on the spring, pull it over, and then work that back out. I'll go ahead and place the tools that I'm going to need up here to install the pedal. Now I'm going to reposition the camera so you can see what I'm doing over here to install the pedal. And the tools that I have here is a pair of needle nose pliers, my wrench with the 1/2-inch socket on it, and 2 1/2-inch wrenches. Okay, so the pedal gets mounted using a pedal mount 135. That's accessory number 11-82-32. It comes with the kit when you order it for the Radius E. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is go ahead and mount the pedal to that pedal mount. You notice the direction that I have the 135 mount. It's with the open end toward the front of the mower, and then the pedal itself goes on with the pedal pad pointed to the left side of the mower. This takes 2 bolts to install. So we're going to get the bolts in place, and we're going to put the nuts on, and we're going to snug them down, not super tight, just enough so that the pedal doesn't flop around too much, and then we can go ahead and move on to bolting it to the mower. In this case, I've used the carriage bolts for bolting the pedal to the mount, and I'll save the hex bolts. I'll save the hex bolts for bolting it to the mower itself. So we're going to mount this in the center of that opening with the pedal aimed to the left side so we can operate it with our left foot. So we're going to go ahead and make sure the bolts are good and tight. Okay, with the pedal bolted to the mower itself, then the next thing that we want to do is go ahead and raise the foot pan up. You notice on the Radius, the foot pan straddles that pedal, so we have to lay the cable in here underneath that foot pan so you can open and close it and still get to the belt and not cause problems for the cable. So the first thing we're going to do, pull the rubber boot off, spin nut number 1 off the fitting, and take nut number 2 and spin it as far onto that fitting as it will go. Now we're going to go ahead and get our hardware out of the box, and from the yellow bag, we're going to remove the 1/4-inch pin, the removable clevis, and the cotter pin. Set these all right here where we can find them. Now, first thing we're going to do is go ahead and slip the wire into the slotted hole, slide the fitting into that hole, and start nut number 1 back onto that fitting. It's a little tight in here, but that's good because it helps protect that cable. But it is a little tricky to get your fingers in there to get that nut started. Okay, so once you have the nut started, before you thread it on a little bit, and then take that rubber boot and push the fitting into the rubber boot. You can kind of hold it with one finger and shove the fitting into it. Then we're going to go ahead and snug the bolts down, or the jam nuts down rather. Now we're going to connect the removable clevis, and you may have to pull that wire out, which is why we didn't connect it to the flap end. So once I have the clevis on, then I'm going to slide it into place and position it on the hole inside the pedal there. Take my 1/4-inch pin, slip it in there, and then install my cotter pin. What I found works best for the cotter pin is to go ahead and use that pair of needle nose pliers, so you can reach in there and get it installed. Now when you put the cotter pin in, what you want to do is split the pin so that we'll get a wire on each side of the pin itself, and fold them all the way over, about midway up, fold them all the way over so it makes a W shape. Okay, with the cable connected, we want to go ahead and secure the pedal. So we'll take our 1/2-inch wrench and crank those mounting bolts down so they're good and tight. Next thing we want to do is go ahead and secure the cable so that it doesn't get tangled up in the belts and that below. So we're going to put a zip tie on it here. The 48-inch has a convenient hole. Most decks have got something under there that you can get that zip tie into. When you snug the zip tie up, don't pull it super tight. Leave a little bit of slack. Cut off the excess, and then just take a quick check to make sure that nothing's going to get in the way. So there we have the pedal installed. So we're ready to go back over and finish the connection of the cable. Once we get the camera repositioned, connect the cable to the flap end of the mower. So again, I've tried to keep all my parts and tools in that box so I don't kick them around. I've got to get the 3/16 pin, the cotter pin, and this little brass bushing that goes into the hole first. Sometimes that brass bushing is a little bit tight. If it is, and you need to tap on it, what you want to do is put the pin in the bushing first and tap on the pin so you don't end up messing up that little brass bushing. In my case, I didn't need to do that. So I'm going to install the pin with the head toward the spring. In this case, then it's going in from the front to the back. And then I'll put the cotter pin in. And the same thing I'm working on here is to split the pin, fold it into a W shape. That way it keeps both legs short and doesn't reduces the chance of it getting caught up in the anything that maybe come into contact with. Next step then is to go ahead and snug the jam nuts up on the fitting. In this case, we want to leave as little space between the rubber bushing and jam nut number 1 as we can, and that's a good starting point. Okay, so let's take a quick check here and make sure it operates the way we want it to. And this is a little push and release motion, so if you just push straight down, it's only going to come halfway open. What I'm actually doing there is pushing down and letting up as the flap reaches kind of its midpoint. So now I'm going to snug the bolts, snug the jam nuts down rather on the cable, And these need to be fairly snug, but not super tight. And there's some good videos out there if you need a little help on how to operate the GrassFlap. There's a couple of them that you can find for that as well. So it's a push and release motion. And I can partial open it if I want to. So there you have it. That's full installation on this Exmark Radius E. Got any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Thank you.